Welcome to this evening's meeting of Planning and Development Management Committee. Just by way of introduction, my name is Aidan Williams and I serve as the chair of the committee. Also present on this call are the committee vice chair, Councillor Ben Hartley, officers from the council's planning service, legal and democratic services, local highway authority, as well as the elected councillors who make up voting members of the planning committee. Before we continue, I should advise for everyone's information that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So please mute your microphones to minimise background noise. If you wish to speak on an item, please use the chat facility to notify me and then wait until you're invited to speak. Turning to the agenda, agenda item 1 is attendances. I think all members are present bar Councillor Bunting, who I understand may be joining us later. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any members wishing to declare an interest to any items? No. Okay. Item 3 is minutes to receive and if so determine to approve as correct the record of the minutes of the meetings held 11th and 15th of March. Are members happy to move and second that?
Happy to move, Chair.
Okay, and I'll second that. We'll take those as approved. Item 4 is questions from members of the public. Not been any received. Agenda item 5 is the additional information report that's been circulated to members via email earlier today. And then agenda item 6 is applications for permission to develop. The first application that we'll consider this evening is 432 Flixton Road, which is on page 1 of the committee report. Before we hear from any representations from members of the public, the item is going to be introduced by Ms. Coley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just bear with me while I share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that? Yeah, excellent. Okay. This application relates to 432 Flixton Road in Flixton, which is a former cafe within a row of commercial and retail units at ground floor. Several of these units, including the application site and those on either side, having separate apartments above. The former cafe use included an external seating area, and the hours of use were limited to close at 6 p.m. on Mondays to Saturdays and 3 p.m. on Sundays. So there's the unit there. You can see it within the row, and you've got residential properties there. Retrospective planning permission is sought for the change of this use of this unit to a bar with an outdoor seating and drinking area, a new glazed main elevation with bifold doors and a front door, and an external cooling unit, the latter of which to the rear elevation. In addition, extended hours of use are sought, 10 p.m. on Mondays to Thursdays and 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. You see the front elevation there as proposed, and the floor plan there, and then the as-built rear elevation there with the air conditioning unit and the extractor hood. The retrospective application was submitted following complaints from neighbouring properties, and a number of objections have been received, which are summarised in the officer report. Following advice from the council's nuisance consultee, the applicant has carried out soundproofing works to the unit and produced a noise management plan in an effort to limit the bar's amenity impacts to an acceptable level. You can see a photograph there of the unit as it looks at the moment. So this is retrospective with the apartment above, and then there's a unfortunately we had to take this from Google Street View, so do forgive the markers across the front, but you can see the wider context there of the row which it's in. So the key issue for consideration is the bar's amenity impact on surrounding occupants. Officers recognise the applicant has made efforts to satisfy the nuisance consultee in carrying out soundproofing measures and drawing up the noise management plan. And the nuisance consultee has subsequently confirmed no objection to the application, subject to conditions. Notwithstanding this, it is considered that, having regard to the lack of similar late-night bar and pub uses in the vicinity of the application site, a significant number of objections from neighbours in close proximity to the site, and the large forecast in front of the premises where there is the potential for people to gather, the use results in an unacceptable noise and amenity impact on the occupants of nearby residential properties. In this context, officers do not consider that the proposed noise management plan and or the imposition of additional planning conditions to control noise and disturbance would acceptably address these concerns. A number of the suggested measures would not be enforceable through planning powers. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. There is a speaker against this application. Alex Bridie-Kosh, who I understand has submitted a statement that will be read out by Mr. Day.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to read the statement of Alex Bridie-Kosh. And I do want to just emphasise that these are, the voiced opinions are those of the objector and not those of officers. Okay, as landlord of 4 of the neighbouring units to Brewchimp, I have great concern on how the bar has and will continue to affect my tenants. A tenant left in December 2019 when he found out a bar would be opening below, and I struggled to find new tenants as they all had the same concerns. Brewchimp has caused disruption and concern for everyone, and I have great concern that the proprietor of Brewchimp appears to lack honesty and the ability to follow any rules. And therefore, if he is granted any official permissions to do what he's already been doing without the correct permission, it would appear that any official rules implied will be further ignored. Such example as obtaining a sound report and then having bifold doors fitted in July 2020, but only requesting planning permission in January 2021, which will negatively impact on the results of the sound report. Allowing tables outside on the pavement past the permitted time, which was given to the previous cafe owner of 6 p.m, I believe, photo evidence previously supplied, which caused noise and disturbance to the residential tenants in the flats above. Yes, my tenants did complain, and I have expressed concern about how long they would reside there for, should he be granted the licenses and permissions Brewchimp are seeking. The Brewchimp owner certainly hasn't given an impression of someone who is honest and completely prepared to follow the rules. The complete opposite, in fact. My concerns are echoed by my tenants in all 4 of our units. The bar is detrimental to surrounding businesses. Nobody wants people stood outside their premises, their business premises, smoking and drinking. Nor do they want their customers to have to endure it either. And it is detrimental to the residential tenants, most of which have lived there happily for a number of years. I know one of my tenants, who is a young single parent, is particularly worried and greatly concerned how she will go about finding and affording another home locally. In the summer, when everyone has their windows and doors open, the smell and noise pollution will only be more intense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Day. There is a speaker speaking in favour of the application, I believe David Leap. Is Mr. Leap designated as user on the screen, I think? Mr. Leap, can you hear us?
If we're unable to get hold of Mr. Leap, there is a
We've got the
statement.
written statement. Yeah,
We do have a written statement. Yes.
Oh. Just having a bit of trouble, I think, with your audio, Mr. Leap.
I think Councillor Bunting's joined a call as well now, for the looks of it.
Hello, hi, yes, sorry, apologies to all IT problems. My computer decided it had to do some updates when I tried to join the meeting and wouldn't let me join. Sorry about that. So I take it we've started already, yes?
Yeah, we're just having slight technical issues. Mr. Leap, I don't know if you're happy for us to read out the statement on your behalf. Perhaps if you can indicate in the chat, or if you're happy for us to read the statement out. We can see, Mr. Leap, that the issue is the audio. We're not receiving any audio. I'm wondering, given that you've provided your comments in writing, if you're happy for one of the council officers to read them out on your behalf.
Chairman, just while the gentleman's just typing that in, may I just check? So I know we on, I take it we're on the Flixton, are we on the Flixton Road, on the 432 Flixton Road? Is this the beginning of the first representation, or have we already started? So I just wonder if I'm going to be involved in this item or not.
We've already had a representation.
Right, in that case, just for record, in that case, I won't be taking part in this item. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Leap, the problem we have is we're not receiving any audio from you. Sound. Not really sure that exactly how we can resolve this.
Mr. Leap does appear to be on mute. Oh, not anymore.
Yeah. It's not just me who's not receiving any audio, is it? Yeah. I'm not sure, Ms. Coley, if we have to add, well, we've not encountered this issue.
No, the written statement is there as a backup for a technological failure. That's why we ask people to submit them. It's at your discretion, Chairman, how we proceed. Ms. Lowes is ready to read out the statement, should you consider that to be the most appropriate way forward.
I think it most likely is the most appropriate way forward, given that we've not been able to rectify the issue with the audio. So, Ms. Lowes, if you can read out the statement, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, no problem. Firstly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. We weren't actually looking for an additional venue at the time, and I was approached by the cafe owners of 434A Flixton Road back in the winter of 2018. It was the wrong time and out of our budget, but the place looked fantastic and had so many similarities to our place on Church Road. Right in the heart of the community chain pub close by, it ticked a lot of boxes. We left it. We were also getting asked by Flixton locals when we were opening one nearer us. I got approached again in spring 2019 and had a partner who was willing to finance the refurbishment. So we agreed a deal and we set about opening on the understanding we could get an alcohol licence. We went through the process with no objections. I would have thought if people had concerns then they would be raised there, but no one did. I was wondering how we got here. The obvious answer is there was a number of objections which led to this process. This was based on the planning issue saying we were operating as a bar, A4 and not A3, restaurant and cafe. When I look at our business, I would say we are both A3 and A4. We have done food events at Flixton with local street food vendors and local businesses like What's the Catch in Ermston, Ermston's local fishmonger, and the Cheese Court in Ermston. So what is A3 and A4? I've taken the description from the Trafford Council portal. An A3 restaurant and cafe for the sale of food and drink for the consumption on the premises, restaurants, snack bars and cafes. An A4 is a drinking establishment, public houses, wine bars and other drinking establishments, but not nightclubs, including drinking establishments with expanded food provision. Rightly or wrongly, we thought we were okay at A3 as we are a bar that frequently does food. We were asked to apply for planning permission for the change of use from A3 to A4, having been open and operating since November 2019, a total of 15 months. The objectors came back with several dubious ones, to say the least. Out of the 10 objectors, 2 have removed their objections, 2 are no longer relevant as they do not live in the area, 4 are just lies based on the fact that we never use the outside area, which Ian Elliott can confirm, leaving just Miss Eldry and Mrs. Alex Brody, all of which I submitted to Tom Parkinson ahead of this meeting as part of my defence. The work myself and Tom Parkinson over the last year have done has been extensive, and I want to thank Tom for his guidance and help. However, being stopped by the head of planning at the 11th hour has caused both stress and anxiety to me at what had already been a hugely difficult time for the hospitality industry. I could perhaps understand if we had never opened, but we have been trading for 15 months prior to this and are established an integral part of the Flixton community. I would have preferred to have addressed the issue considering the site's location out of the town centre and not close to any other late night pubs or bars at the beginning of the process back in April 2020, and might not have spent such huge sums of money and time and just taking the grant money and leaving an empty shop on the high street. But I didn't. We add value to the community. I think I have answered concerns naming the Church Inn 500 yards away, the John Alca 300 yards away, and Trafford's own Flixton House 300 yards away, along with your added comments that they don't have apartments above. I included Brew Chimp on Church Road, which has an apartment above it and is 200 yards from the Roebuck. While I accept that planning could not check every part of the building work undertaken, the fact remains that if the acoustic ceiling had been installed in 2010 by the previous tenant, we would not be here today, as there would be no noise issues. The extensive work by installing the missing acoustic ceiling from 2010 with the noise assessments and on the testimony of Phil Webb directly above the bar and other neighbours next door, all the noisy issues have been addressed. We have a strong link to the community. There are people from every walk of life coming in, some on their way home from the train having a quick pint, someone walking the dog, family calling in after being on the park. As we know from opening Brew Chimp on Church Road, we no longer are the owners as the place developed into what the community wants. This is what happened at Flixton. It is uniquely different to Church Road and somewhat more subdued, but regardless, it belongs to Flixton. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lowes. Are there any members looking to open the debate? Nobody's indicating. I was wondering if I could just perhaps ask for some advice, I suppose, from the planning department. As I understand that, at least my reading of the report is that the environmental health team at the council no longer object on the basis of noise nuisance. And I was just wondering if we could talk through the distinction between what the planning department are considering and the thinking of the environmental health team, given that the basis for refusal is largely impact on residential amenity of neighbouring properties as a consequence of noise. I appreciate I might be putting you on the spot there, Ms. Conway.
No problem, Chairman. Yeah, happy to clarify that. The environmental health officers are a consultee, and they're only a consultee as opposed to the determining authority, because they're only looking at a fairly limited remit. Their remit is obviously to consider noise nuisance, and we take their comments extremely seriously, particularly when they say that there will be harm. But ultimately, they're assessing whether they think a statutory nuisance would arise or not under the Environmental Protection Acts, whereas the planning service look very much more broadly at amenity and living conditions. So we're looking at whether somebody living above or nearby this property would have a reasonable standard of living that they should be expected to enjoy if this went ahead. And that's broader because it also looks at effectively at the baseline. So one of our concerns about this expressed in the report is that this is an area without any other types of this use in the row. If you recall the photograph I showed you, all the other premises in the row are in generally in daytime use. I believe there's a shop that's open later into the evening, but generally don't attract people in this. And that baseline and that sort of quietude that they're already enjoying means that we think there would be a distinct change to their living conditions, and thus a harmful impact on their amenity. It may not meet the test for a statutory nuisance, but nonetheless, it would detrimentally impact on the enjoyment of their properties.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. And Councillor Thomas indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I visited the site yesterday, and unfortunately I couldn't get access to Breacham, although I would have liked to have had a conversation if they were there. The issues generally are the L7 breaches or potential breaches, and with the installation of the bifold doors, which I would assume are there to be opened, it'll negate any of the soundproofing that's been undertaken with the noise coming out and travelling upwards. There are still, I'm told, since the installation of the ceiling, there's still noise transgression to the neighbours on both sides, although one of them said it was nowhere near the issues it was prior to that being installed. But other neighbours have said to their landlord that is still the case. There is 3 shop fronts next to it. Any movement out onto the pavement will impinge on the access to these stores, both sides. One of them hosting will servicing and things like that. So the number of issues with people with going past such an on-street facility. The highway is also a main route for children walking to and from primary school, just around the corner from the shop front. So on an evening, well, on a sunny afternoon, shall we say, when people are out having a drink, they can sit there and basically have children walking past them, which I don't think is appropriate for where it is. Also, outside, people will be smoking. Smoke rises. The windows of neighbouring properties would need to be closed to stop that. And again, outside, people talk. So again, noise rising from the front of the shop or the bar into family homes. kids in 2 of the properties, I believe. I don't think his kids are school age. I don't think it's an appropriate place to put this. Whilst I agree that as a small village amenity, it's very good, but I cannot see that allowing the changes to include the late night opening till 10 o'clock being workable in where it's situated. So I will be agreeing with the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with quite a bit of what Councillor Thomas has said. I know as a committee, we tend to take a dim view of these type of applications. You know, people have gone ahead and done something, and then they've changed and come back to the committee. But I think we need to put that aside and look at it objectively as an application in itself. I can see kind of the business reasons behind this. Obviously, being close to Flixton Station, there's a potential large flow of people going through there, which would create quite a bit of business. But I do think the impact on the neighbouring communities is going to be pretty severe. I do appreciate that the applicant has made some effort to make things better through the noise management plan, and I think it would help a little, but you've still got the issue that it's smack bang right next to a large amount of residential properties that are going to impact on this, and also people walking past. It's going to impact on them quite considerably, and the issues of smoke that Councillor Thomas has raised is also a factor in this. I do know that the applicant did say this is very similar to the other property that they have on Church Road, but I don't think you can make those sort of comparisons. Every application is different neighbours, different impacts on the community, and so I don't think you can make that comparison. And we have had quite a few complaints from residents. I know the applicant says that some of those have been withdrawn or people have moved, but we've no particular evidence for that. So my view is that it is going to impact quite considerably on the local community, and on balance, I think we should agree with officer recommendations and refuse this application unless I can be convinced otherwise by what other people have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I can see that, Mr. Leap, you have made some comments in the chat facility. I'll just clarify the process we've taken this evening. Unfortunately, the device that you're using doesn't appear to be picking up and transmitting any of the audio. As a consequence, we've defaulted to reading out your written statement, and that's the sole representation that you're able to make to committee this evening. Now, Councillor Hartley, you've also indicated you'd like to.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm probably coming to a similar conclusion to Councillor Proctor, although I don't think I've definitely made my mind up on this one, because I do think it's quite borderline. Borderline might not be a word, but I think it's quite a narrow issue in a way, because the issue is the noise, the potential for the noise, and the impact on residential amenity. And I do think we need to bear in mind the current use that's already been approved for a cafe. And as I understand it, the principle of having outdoor seating, having people outside, was approved as part of that, subject to conditions around the hours when that might be. So that principle of having people outside has already been approved, and no doubt that there could have been a potential for noise when it was used in that way, and if it was used in that way again. So people being outside, the potential for noise would be an issue under the current lawful use, in my view. But I think the issue here is, and I suppose, just picking up on what Councillor Thomas said, I suppose, you know, I don't know what the licensing situation was with the cafe, and that's probably not relevant for us, but it will be possible for that lawful use cafe to continue, for people to be sat outside. If the cafe had the right license, they could be sat outside drinking alcohol when children walk past. So that's the situation we could have under the current lawful use as a cafe. What's different, I think, about this is the extension in the hours. So it's the extension in the opening hours that's proposed, combined with that potential for noise. So whereas, you know, the noise at the moment at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock is something that you know will be lawfully fine, you know, subject to it not being a statutory nuisance. It's that potential for noise later on with the extended opening hours that are proposed. The design changes to the premises, I think, are fine, because the principle of outdoor seating has already been approved. So I did wonder when I looked at this, is there a way that this could be dealt with through an approval and through conditions? And, you know, I've looked at the plans and the work that's already been done. So I wondered whether, you know, having a double door at the entrance would help with the noise mitigation. Take on board what Councillor Thomas said about you know, smokers. So the issue here is, you know, you could have a condition which said, you know, no outdoor seating after 9 o'clock or whatever your condition was. But I think the understandable concerns for residents is that people will still go outside at closing time on the way home. People will go outside to have a smoke. They might go outside to have to make a phone call, and that does cause disturbance. So, you know, then I wondered, well, could the smokers use the yard at the rear, all that sort of stuff? But that's probably not for us to speculate about. So it does. I mean, what's fairly compelling, I think, is that the sort of premises have been used in the way that's been proposed already, I think, and that has been opened later into the evening, and that noise has had an impact on residents. So, and I'm also, you know, I think persuaded by the advice from officers that if we were to try and control this use through conditions, that would be very hard to enforce. So at the moment, I'm minded to agree with the officer recommendation, but I do think it's quite a narrow issue of objection to this. So I'd welcome listening to what other members have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jerome.
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Hartley has really hit upon the dilemma here, in that the new opening hours will be fairly lengthy. I mean, they are Sunday to Thursday up until 10 o'clock in the evening, and then from Friday to Saturday they're up to 11 o'clock in the evening. And if you put that alongside the nature of the disturbance it will cause to those people living above the premises, I think that is quite a disturbance to them, and I think we would be wrong as a committee to let this application go forward. And maybe an application does need to come back where there's more compromise in terms of the outdoor seating and the hours allowed around that. So I'm going to have to agree with the recommendation here and propose that we refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really hard one in some ways. And there's a side of me which was torn and would have liked to approve this. I can really see why they wanted to do this, or are doing it. And I think Councillor Hartley kind of made the very valid point that the point about outdoor seating has already been established in the previous planning commission. But it is the timing, and that's the real key. And I mean, I did some research in terms of their marketing, their online marketing, in terms of what they're trying to sell in terms of as an establishment. Obviously, given COVID, lockdown means it's not open at the moment, and we're not talking about they're not advertising themselves as a quiet wine bar that has a couple of people in it each night. They are talking about being a heart of a community, but that has a much bigger impact than on residents. And I find it hard to judge. And to be honest, I can only take officer recommendations who are the experts on this in terms of the impact on neighbouring properties. This in a different situation, this could have worked, but I have to take the advice of officers. So, I mean, I will listen to other contributions if any others are made, but I am veering on agreeing with officer recommendations on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, you indicated you'd like to clarify some.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to comment on the front side of the papers that we've got, the report we've got, that the previous cafe premises did rightly have outside tables under the last planning application, or the planning application that was passed. But a key part of that is that the hours were from 8 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. in the evening, Monday to Saturday, 8 till 1500 hours on Sundays and bank holidays. This goes a lot further than that. And as I mentioned before, with families, past 6 o'clock, then you're getting into children going to bed and the impact it may have on them. It also, as part of the planning permission, it was, I think it's 2 tables, and the tables and chairs had to be removed from the public footway after they closed or stopped serving outside at 6 o'clock. I'd just like to clarify that as a point of what the previous planning permission was for external seating. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corden.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm troubled by this one. It's one where I almost feel that the community needs to have a say beyond the normal planning process. This will change the nature of that part of Flixton Village if it's allowed. So, and I don't feel that it's got support for that as yet. I do remember the cafe that was there before. I think I'm sad to say it was the worst cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. It was while we were campaigning in Flixton one year, and but there was no way that people outside that cafe were making any noise. It was a very quiet cafe. So this is going to change the nature of that row of shops quite considerably. And so I don't feel I can use the precedent of the sitting outside. It will change it. I don't think Flixton's had a voice on that. There is part of me that says this would be good for that area, but Flixton hasn't spoken on it, it seems to me, and I feel lacking in that. So I don't feel empowered enough to change the nature of that Flixton village without more support and what have you from the community. And so I'm supporting the objection on the supporting refusal on the grounds by officers, but I do have reservations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Winstanley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm building on what Councillor Cordingley said. I'm broadly in favour of this. I think it's to have this sort of business there as a community bar, for want of better expression, I think is an excellent idea. And that area of Flixton is, if you, I know we said we can't compare it to Church Road, but if you can compare the two businesses, it's been maintained you can't compare it to Church Road. I think you can. Church Road as a brew chimp there is surrounded by a lot more houses and flats than this area of Flixton is. So in terms of the impact here will be lower. However, it is the length of the opening hours, I think, which is the real issue here. And it's to pick up something which Mike said, is Flixton needs a say so in this, because I think this could add to the area. And I think what I really wanted to say was if the applicant's still on the call, If, as appears to be the way this is going tonight, that we refuse permission for this, I'd encourage him to work with the council officers to change the plans to make it more acceptable, because I think this could be a really good business. But in the current format, I totally understand why the length of opening is what could really it could really count against it in terms of local residents. But I say again to the applicants, come back again with alternative plans if we do turn this down tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think you make a really valid point there, and sentiments that I'd like to echo, because I'd really be quite comfortable seeing usage of this type in areas that are surrounded by residential units. You know, I live in Stratford and we have bars that are not that dissimilar in Stratford town centre dotted around. And I think, you know, if they're done correctly, there's no reason that it can't work and that neighbouring residents can't enjoy use of their own properties without disturbance. So I do think I'd take on board though some of the remarks that Councillor Thomas made about the bifolding doors, and that perhaps, and I think Councillor Hartley also sort of indicated, touched on this during his comments, that when he talked about whether or not we could mitigate through conditions, that actually if there were some amendments to this application, we might be in a position where committee will be looking to approve it. Now, just to clarify for committee, it's been moved by Councillor Jerome that we vote in favour with officer recommendation to refuse. I don't think it's been seconded and there hasn't been a counter motion. I can't see anyone else indicating that they'd like to speak.
Up to second, Chair. Though.
Okay. Is there any member who hasn't contributed looking to contribute? No? Okay. I think we've had quite a robust discussion there. So it has been proposed and seconded that this application be refused in line with officer recommendation. I'll move to a vote and I'm just going to circulate through members as you appear on my screen. Councillor Stannett.
Support the application to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Courtenay.
Support the application to refuse.
Minutes.
I support officer recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Support officer recommendation to refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jerome.
I support officer recommendation to refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Support officer recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you. Support the officer recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carey.
Refuse, please, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you, Chair. With a great deal of regret, support officer recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I support the officer's recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Barclay.
I support officer recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. And I shall also vote in line with officer recommendation. The application is refused. Now turn to Unit 1, Altrincham Retail Park, which is on page 13 of your report. Before we hear from our representation, people speaking in favour and against, the item will be introduced by Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. Whilst I'm providing the introduction, my colleague Ms. Lowes is going to share her screen with the presentation on it, with the slideshow. This full planning application relates to land and units at the Altrincham Retail Park in Broadheath. The proposal involves the extension and subdivision of the existing home-based store to provide a downsized unit, and then the provision of a new retail unit to be used as a discount food store and occupied by Lidl. A similar application was refused by the Planning Committee last July on retail policy and highway safety grounds in accordance with the officer recommendation at that time. There is an additional information report for this application. It provides an update on matters of principle and on some technical details and provides some adjusted and new conditions and clarifies the position regarding the overall conclusions. It also explains that 2 further letters of objection have been received, including one on behalf of Tesco Stores Limited, which members should have received a copy of. There is nothing further to report following the publication of the additional information. The NPPF is clear that local planning authorities should adopt a town centre first approach when assessing applications for main town centre uses. The application site is in an out of centre location. The focus of discussions surrounding retail policy have again been in relation to the sequential test, and specifically the opportunity afforded by the sequentially preferable Altair site. The applicant has confirmed that it is contractually committed to an amended Altair proposal, including a new Lidl food store. When having regard to the evidence provided by the applicant, it has been concluded that Altair is available and suitable to accommodate the food store element of this proposal. The NPPF is clear that where an application fails to satisfy the sequential test, it should be refused. And the proposal is also contrary to development plan policies on that basis, being policy W2 and policy S11. On highways matters, the focus has again been on a proposed new egress onto George Richards Way and the potential for an unacceptable impact on highway safety. However, there have been important changes to its design and location relative to the last application, including its positioning further to the west, away from the junction with the A56 and the area where lane changing occurs. Additional highways evidence has also been submitted, including video recordings of vehicle movements and further modelling of signalised junctions. The position of the LHA is that these constitute significant and material changes relative to the last application. Whilst there could remain some residual safety risks, it's been concluded by the LHA that this proposal would not give rise to an impact on highway safety, which could be deemed unacceptable. So the previous highways objection and refusal reason has been removed. The impact on a designated heritage asset, the Railway Inn, has again been afforded great weight. However, it has been concluded that the harm of a less than substantial nature will be outweighed by the public benefits. The proposed development will deliver a series of important benefits. This includes investment in the retail park, the protection and creation of jobs, improved consumer choice, and the retention of trade in the local area. It's also consistent with NPPF principles concerning brownfield land maximisation and focusing development in sustainable locations. Set against these benefits are the harms, including the failure of the NPPF sequential test and conflict with development plan policies. However, the sequential test failure is unusual in this situation since the applicant is committed to both sites. On the issue of the harm arising from the failure of the sequential test, the officer's view is that no such harm is likely to arise based on the consideration of all the available evidence in front of the council, given the likelihood of both schemes being delivered in practice. To delay the application scheme until such time as Altair is delivered would be to delay the benefits that would arise from it. It is to be recalled that concerns surrounding unacceptable highway safety harm, to which significant weight was afforded previously, have been addressed. Paragraph 90 of the NPPF advises that planning permission should be refused if the sequential test is failed, which is consistent with the approach of development plan policies. However, it is considered that there are good reasons to depart from it. This is when having regard to the likely outcome of the application of the sequential test specific to this case, and also in considering the collection of benefits which are considered sufficient to outweigh the scheme's harms. These are considered to amount to material considerations under the terms of section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, which would displace the conflict with individual development plan policies and with a test of the NPPF. It is recommended, therefore, that planning permission is granted for this revised application. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. We have 2 people speaking to this application. Speaking against, I understand, is Judy Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can, Ms. Collins. Just to clarify, you've got 3 minutes to speak, and thank you for joining us. If you do run over time, I'll just politely ask that you wrap up your remarks. Thank you.
I have timed. Altrincham and Bowden Civic Society have been asked by desperate residents in the nearby streets to object to the revised planning application. Neither they nor the Civic Society have been able to get a response from planning officers or environmental health in the short time taken for this application to come to the planning committee. If it is refused for a second time, the society has been given permission to use Rule 6 at appeal. The initial application was refused on the sequential test and on highways. Given that Altair has yet to embark on phase 1 and Lidl will be a later phase of 3 years or so, and Broadheath already has Asda and Waitrose, it seems obvious that a further supermarket will impact on the town centre. Trafford asked us to chair a meeting with Amy, local businesses and residents over concerns re heavy goods vehicles on the streets in Broadheath. Amy was unable to suggest any remedy. Waitrose has recently obtained increased delivery hours because of home deliveries, and Broadheath is zoned for further industry in the local plan, despite the large number of houses already built. The proposed egress from the site poses great danger on a busy pedestrian route. As vehicles leave the store, they have to cross a pavement where pedestrians are visiting other stores and McDonald's and often have children in buggies. As the driver tries to join George Richards Way, they have to look backwards over their right shoulder to be aware of other motorists who may be unwilling to give way. The journey to Altrincham requires crossing 2 banks of traffic in less than 70 metres. The Civic Society is always happy to speak in advance of planning applications coming to the planning committee, and it is unfortunate that it's not happened in this case despite an approach to Lidl. We are great fans of Lidl, who we know have been looking for a site on the A56 for many years, and would welcome an opportunity for home base to remain. We are sure that Lidl usually tries to be good neighbours, and it's unfortunate in this case that this has not happened. The elderly residents approached us because they felt unable to address the committee, especially online. We've been able to help regards the present problems with rats around the site thanks to Electricity North West, who sent a team out to clear the site. We do appreciate the hard work put in, read the traffic problems, but we still think that they do exist. Trafford passed a desperate complaint from Huxley Street residents yesterday who say their lives will be ruined. Perhaps Lidl at least would have the decency to contact their new neighbours in the event of this planning application being approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Speaking in favour of the application, I believe, is Nick Harvey.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Mr. Harvey. Thank you for joining us. Similarly, you've got 3 minutes to speak, and if you do go over time, I'll just politely ask that you wrap up your remarks. Thank you.
Well, good evening, councillors, and thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to speak. My name is Nick Harvey, and I'm the Head of Property for Lidl UK. I'm delighted that the application before you has been recommended for approval by your officers. By working proactively together, we've been able to overcome the concerns expressed by the members of this committee last year, and with an improved, materially different application before you today, including the revised access arrangements, the provision of more cycle parking, and the introduction of electrical vehicle charging points, the proposals would see a £3 million investment delivered into the retail park and Port Trafford, starting immediately post the grant of an implementable planning permission, and to deliver Lidl's first food store in Altrincham, and providing the right size of a modern retail unit for Homebase to successfully trade out of. If the members approve the application, you will do so in the knowledge that 50 jobs at Homebase have been safeguarded, and that around 40 new jobs will be created by Lidl later this year, and that over 100 temporary construction jobs will be supported during the construction. As we hopefully come out of the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic, these jobs and this investment could not be better timed. And as you'll know, the previous application was refused by the committee last year due to concerns about highway safety and the sequential test. In both cases, the committee concluded that the applicant had not adequately demonstrated that the provision of the requested evidence, that the proposal was acceptable to the satisfaction of the council, and that the relevant policy test had been passed. That decision is currently being challenged by an appeal and with an inquiry scheduled for June this year. So as your officer has written in her report, the application before you today is materially different to the one which came before the committee last year, and it is supported by additional information. These include changes that have been made to the proposed egress onto George Richards Way, which the local highways authority and the Transport for Greater Manchester are now comfortable with, subject to the conditions which we are happy to accept. In addition, and whilst your officer's conclusions about the sequential test remain largely the same in terms of suitability and availability, and based on the information that we've also now provided, your officer is able to make a different recommendation on planning balance, including in the context of more up-to-date case law. So I can also confirm that Lidl remains contractually committed to delivering 2 new food stores in Altrincham, the one before you today in the Altrincham Retail Park, and the smaller metropolitan format store at the Alt-Air site. It is clear from the evidence before the council and verified by the external advisors that a new Lidl and the smaller home-based retail unit will not have a negative impact on the wider retail in Altrincham as a whole, or specifically the delivery of the second Lidl store in the town in the Alt-Air site within the next 3 to 4 years. By granting planning approval today, you'll be allowing us to build and open the new Lidl store and the smaller home-based retail unit within the next 12 months. By granting planning approval today, you will unlock investment, create new jobs, and safeguard those existing roles at Homebase. And by granting planning permission today, you will allow the applicants to withdraw the appeal challenging last year's decision, saving all parties significant time and significant costs. And I very much hope that members are able to follow the recommendation from the officer and approve this application. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Councillor Minnis, you've indicated you'd like to open the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I was having a look at this, and whilst I really I do think the home base needs, and I said this last time, to be honest, the home base does need to change to move with the times to actually make it a viable business. And I support that part of it, if that makes any sense. I'm still concerned about road safety and the level of traffic. The egress, I think, is still not safe. It's better than the last egress, but it's still unsafe. The whole idea, I know it's one way and you come out and you turn left only. I still have concerns. The stretch of road, yes, it's moved slightly, but the stretch of road is quite short, where you're trying to fit an egress in. And whilst it's slightly better than before, it's still, in my view, unsafe. To bring something unsafe in, and then if somebody dies, we would all be very sad for that to happen. So I think that when we do approve applications, we need to really think about how that is going to be in the future and any potential accidents that can happen. So I would given that it doesn't pass all of the sequential tests and things, and there's problems along the way, and I understand it's just about sort of, being tweaked and whatnot, I still think it's too wrong, I'm afraid. So I'll be proposing that we actually refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Minnis. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is still quite a challenging application for us to decide on. The officer's report and the introduction we had was really useful, and I think particularly the commentary on the sequential test and the recent case law about that was also really useful. So, I mean, my understanding is it does fail the sequential test, but the sequential test is there for a reason. It's to ensure the viability and vitality of town centres, and usually that would be sort of all important. And I do still think Altrincham is in a precarious position. It's going through obviously a real good time at the moment, but we've got the uncertainty around COVID. But the assessment is that that there will be no impact on investments in Altrincham Town Centre. So I'm reassured by that. So I know Lidl are contractually committed to the Altair site as well, but I think the report does say that that's obviously not guaranteed, still not guaranteed to happen, and contractual obligations can be got out of if need be. And I suppose that's a reservation I have. So if Lidl were to pull out of the Altair site, then that would present a problem, I think, because then what would the developer at Altair do? Would that investment in Altair then be under threat? Bearing in mind it's been delayed by many years already, which I think we talked about at the last meeting where the previous application was considered. So would another operator, another food operator, would they consider investing in Altair, and would they be deterred by the fact that Lidl was operating out of centre on the retail park? So I'm still, I know there's no guarantees about this, but I still think there's a potential for there to be some threat to investment in the town centre in the future. But I think it's a real balancing act, and I think Lidl are contractually committed at the moment, and I'm perhaps sort of speculating as to what might happen. I couldn't see any comments from Nicole, isn't it? Nicole, the developer for Altair. It'd be useful to know if Lidl pulled out, would they see any threat to their investment? But I don't think we have that information. So the sequential test, I think, is really difficult, but I think the report does address it. Paragraph 122 is really helpful in that the unusual circumstances at the moment is that Lidl control that alternative site, and so therefore there isn't that viable sort of town centre alternative. I think so. I think I do have a number of other reservations about it. Councillor Minnis talked about the egress. I still have a reservation about that. The report acknowledges, I think, that there is a potential residual road safety risk despite the improvements that have been made. So this is covered at paragraph 46 in the report. So the LHA commented that there's no requirement for this new egress. There's no traffic capacity issue with the existing arrangements, which operate safely, and the new egress could still create a highway safety problem to some degree where none currently exists. However, that does not give rise to an impact on highway safety, which could be deemed unacceptable. And I suppose the key point there is unacceptable in planning terms, because I think in lay terms, I think residents would say that any deterioration on road safety was unacceptable, but it's unacceptable in planning terms that we've got to deal with. So I think the egress has been, the issue with the egress probably has been satisfied, although it does feel uncomfortable to be in effect approving that when there might be an increased road safety risk from that development. The proposal doesn't enhance soft landscaping in the area. It's a very hard and harsh landscape at the moment. I think there's a missed opportunity there. It doesn't do anything to enhance facilities for pedestrians or cyclists. I know it's a retail park, and the vast majority of people going there will go by car and use the free parking that's there. But I do think, developers should be taking the opportunity to enhance facilities for pedestrians and cyclists. And the NPPF and the core strategy do require that, and this development doesn't deliver anything to help with that, I think, beyond cycle parking possibly. And then the design principle, the report talks about several design principles not being met. The design isn't great, but it's consistently not great with the rest of the retail park. So in a way, that sort of design has already been established, I think. So there's still, in my mind, there's still a lot not to like about the application, but the benefits are significant. The economic benefits, which Mr. Harvey outlined, sort of the creation or the retention of 90 jobs. I think it provides a discount food shopping choice in Altrincham, where there perhaps isn't so much of one now. It's also developing a brownfield site and making best use of that site. That part of the car park at the moment near Homebase isn't well used, and so this proposal does at least make better use of that part of the site. So I think it is quite a challenging one, but overall, I'm probably minded to agree with the officer recommendation to approve this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jerome.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I do have problems with this application still, pretty much for the same reasons that I did before. Like Councillor Hartley, I'm not convinced the sequential test is met. And I do think this application will pull further from the town centre. I mean, the Institute of Place Management, who study town centres and have come up with their 25 factors, they do talk about how town centres need that range and quality of shops. You know, they need a tenant mix, and they need an availability of alternative formats. And I think Councillor Hartley's right in saying that there's no certainty around the Altair. Will it ever be built? Will Lidl get the chance to move in there at all? Can be questioned. And also they're proposing a very small Lidl shop in Altair, but a much bigger one at this site. And you can see there are a number of supermarkets, as the objector mentioned. You know, you've got the Asda, which is a similar type of supermarket to Lidl. You've got the Aldi there already. And I do feel that these will be pulling from the town centre. And where the town centre is more predicated towards active travel, walking, cycling, catching bus or tram, this is very much predicated around car use, this place. So this is another shop that will increase the car use at this site. And if you look at the data that they provide on the travel management, it does say that this shop will be pulling in over 100 cars per hour. And we know with this type of supermarket, people will be stopping there for quite a time. So those cars will build up on this site, and I think will cause highway issues. So I don't think the sequential test is met, in my opinion, and I think it could have consequences for Altrincham town centre. So I'm really worried on this point. On the egress, I'm still not satisfied. To me, I think the LHA is right. There will be some danger still there. And also the LHA questions the need for this altogether. So I am really worried about it. I think it does present a new danger that's not already there. But also it breaks up the pavement. Lots of people do walk to this site. And now they're going to be interrupted by cars coming out of the site. Many of them looking for a quick exit. And trying to beat traffic coming from the other exit. And it might cause disruption within the car park, people trying to use one exit or the other to get out of the site quicker. So overall, I'm still fairly worried about this application, and I think I'm inclined to not support it, but I still want to hear what others have to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to have to disagree with the sort of Councillor Minister and Councillor Joe. I'm probably far closer to Councillor Hartley's position on this one, although perhaps I'm a little bit more positive about it than he. In terms of the two main reasons that it was refused previously, I think the highways one, as Councillor Hartley quite rightly points out, is, I think, sufficiently resolved. Although he pointed out quite rightly that yes, there is a potential highway issue there, it is not deemed unacceptable. And you could argue that any change to the A56, a single extra car down the road, is a potential additional risk. But is it an unacceptable potential additional risk? I would agree with our officers that it isn't. The previous egress, yes, absolutely. If we were discussing that one now, I would not be happy with it. But with it as it is now, I think it's been resolved. There are numerous businesses along that A56 that have egress and access across the pavements. It doesn't cause an issue. The idea that people are going to come out of there quickly, well, not unless you, only if you've got a death wish, you're going to try and do that. You're going to edge to the side of the A56, have a good, and then you'll try and sort of spot your opponent and get out. But the idea you're going to come out and cross the pavement section quickly, you simply wouldn't do, because you're going to have to wait for a gap at the A56 unless you're extremely lucky. In terms of the sequential test, is perhaps more of an issue, but I don't think it's as big an issue as some speakers have made. Yes, I accept that the Altair site is a sequentially preferable site, but as Altair have been very clear, they intend to use both sites. If anything, it'd be in Altair's interest to, the other site is probably the better site for them. So you probably imagine if they weren't going to go ahead with both, they would only go ahead with the Altair site. And yes, I accept also, as has been pointed out by one of the council officers earlier as well, that there is a 3-year potential. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't the officer; it was the speaker who sort of talked about a 3-year gap. But I don't think that gap is going to be sufficient in order to prevent us judging it on this basis, because I think Altair will be making long-term plans and not just in the immediate future. So I can't think of a reason why, unless the entire Altair site were to cease to go ahead at all, that Altair wouldn't want to be in the Altair site. It's not in their interest not to be. So with a small reservation, I'm happy in terms of the sequential arguments, even though yes, technically it's not met. There are good reasons why we can go ahead regardless. I also agree with what Councillor Hartley had to say about the design, but then again, it's rare perhaps to see a building on one of these retail parks is a thing of beauty. It's much as I'd love to see a mock Georgian Aldi at this location, it would be perhaps slightly unusual, and perhaps more than I can hope for. As for the cycling issues, yes, there are some cycles, but then it's not the cycle sort of site you're going to go to on the site. If you're going to turn up at Aldi, do your full weekly shop, and then balance it all off your handlebars as you wobble your way down the road on your way home, that's probably more of a highways risk than the egresses. So overall, Chairman, I think Aldi has done all that it can really to work with us in terms of this application. I think they've made significant improvements from the time previous in terms of the egress. They've provided additional information in terms of the sequential test, which has allowed us to mitigate the concerns we had regarding that. And if I'm taking Councillor Hartley as proposing that we accept officer recommendation, I'm more than happy to second that. If Councillor Hartley says he doesn't wish to propose it, then I will propose it myself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I supported this application last time, so you will not be surprised that I will be supporting this again tonight, and I will be seconding Councillor Bunting's proposal that we accept officer recommendations. I mean, I sound like I'm echoing some of Councillor Bunting's comments, but I mean, just quickly summarise why I think that we should be supporting this tonight. I mean, just looking at the issues. I mean, we've got the sequential test. There's 2 points. First, there's the point about Altair. I mean, to go back on the comments we made last time about how long we were waiting on Altair. I mean, I really don't think that we can kind of delay any sort of development whilst the decades go by on the Altair development. And secondly, the impact on the town centre. I just don't agree with Councillor Jerome. The impact on the town centre. We're talking about very different custom this is in the town centre. There might be an impact on Tesco, a massive superstore on the edges of the town centre, but that is what effectively business is about. It's about making your own market and competing against your own challengers. There's nobody's actually mentioned it, but I will mention the heritage asset. Because Tesco did. I mean, if there is any damage to the heritage asset, then it has already been happened. And I actually would argue that this actually improves the heritage asset. It's certainly better to have something being built behind it than one great, ugly, massive car park, which has, even at the best of times, next to no cars on it. I mean, it really is an awful site on the side of the A56. And the fact that we're actually going to be utilising this public space rather than having it empty and not even using it for cars. And I know a lot of members here would much prefer, I think all of us would, reduce car usage. But the fact that we've got a great slab of concrete which isn't even being used for what it's actually supposed to be, I think is a real disgrace. And I think actually this is an advantage of the scheme. I mean, on the egress, I mean, there is an egress on the other side of the on the entrance to TK Maxx. I mean, and highways officers have said they don't deem it significant risk. So I really am supportive of this scheme. We've got to really think as well about the impact on jobs, particularly at the moment, and the impact that this is going to have on local residents, both in terms of Lidl as well as home base. So I'm really supportive of this tonight, Chair, and I'm happy to second Councillor Bunting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cordon, you indicated you had a question. I can see that I think there has been an exchange in the chat. Did you still want to contribute?
No, I'm fine on that question. Rebecca cleared it up.
Thank you. Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you, Chair. I had a real sense of deja vu when I read this application, because I don't think it's materially different to the one that we saw last time. And the two objectives from last time were based on highways and based on the sequential test. So I from my non-planning expert point of view, say that those still remain as the two issues. But I refer to the in terms of the expert planning view, though, that the Highways Authority say it's a not unacceptable risk because of the slight change that's been made to the new road that's planned. However, we say quite clearly it still fails the sequential test, except we then say, but it is little. I saw the Councillor Bunting said Aldi, but it is little we're talking about, isn't it? Just having looking at my papers there. The Lidl have a contractual obligation to develop on the Altair site, but Lidl, if memory serves, are part of the Schwartz Group. They're massive. They're on the same scale as Walmart. Their contractual obligation could change tomorrow, not because they intend to change, but because their business model will change. They'll renegotiate the contract. So I don't think we can add any weight to a contractual requirement at this stage. So I'm minded to vote against officer recommendation because I think it still fails the sequential test, as our planning officers say it does. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I really support the application. I think it's making good use of the retail site. It's keeping it alive. I mean, that section of the retail site is pretty dead, and it's good to bring it into life. It will attract people into other parts of the retail site as well. And so it's encouraging people to visit it. It's maintaining jobs. I mean, I do understand the concerns about the highways risks, but anything that this site was used to develop, any way that this site is developed would have concerns over the highways. And I don't think we should in perpetuity refuse things just because of the perceived increased risk now. So I think it's an exciting development. It's got lots of advantages. Our officers are content with things. They have made their judgments, and I think they've made them quite clear. So I'm really happy to support it, and I hope that other people can as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. There's no one else indicating that they wish to speak at present, so I'll just clarify my own thinking on this application. Members who were at the committee meeting the previous application on this site came forward to will know that I proposed that we support the application contrary to officer recommendation, and a key reason for that was that I didn't really agree with the application of the sequential test and the way that process was utilised. My views haven't changed in that regard. I think, Altrincham, we need to consider that Altrincham town centre already has a Tesco, a Sainsbury's, a Marks and Spencer's, and an Iceland in it. I don't think that we can pin everything on Altair, given, as Councillor Morgan indicated, that Altair has been in the pipeline for pretty much more than half of my lifetime. I think, you know, the world goes on, and if a business wants to bring forward an application to develop elsewhere in the borough, then they should be entitled to do so. In terms of the highways objections, I can understand what members are saying, but I think if we were to refuse this application on the grounds of highways, despite the fact that paragraphs 45 through 48 quite clearly explain why the Highways Authority no longer feel that they can robustly object to the application, I think that would be a pretty weak refusal, if I'm being honest. Now, despite the fact that I was happy with the original application that came previously, I am capable of recognising that this is an improved application. As we heard from Mr. Harvey, they've now included electric vehicle charging points. They've improved cycling parking provision. I think in paragraph 84 of the report, we see that the council's tree officer is happy that there's actually an improved contribution in terms of tree replacement. I think they've said that we might actually get a net gain in terms of trees on the site. So I'm quite capable of recognising that I think there's some real benefits to committee having refused previously, and the applicant having considered the remarks of the committee and then submitting a new application or a revised application which may have enhanced the offer. I'm happy with the proposal to support the application and grant permission this evening, and that's how I intend to vote. Now, it has been proposed and seconded that we approve the application in line with officer recommendation. I think there's been a counter proposal to refuse, but I don't think that counter proposal has been seconded. I can't see anyone else indicating in the chat that they want to speak, but I will just give members a minute or two to indicate if they did have any further remarks that they want to make. No, right. Well, in that case, I think we have had quite a robust discussion on that. Before I move to the vote, I would just say, I'm not sure if Mr. Harvey's still listening, but Ms. Collins did, in her representation, indicate that she thought it would be very welcome indeed if the applicant could reach out to residents on Huxley Street. And I think I just wanted to reiterate that remark. It seems to me that the applicant has tried to work to improve their application, and I think if they can take on board that feedback from Ms. Collins, that would be really welcome. So we'll move to the vote now, and I'll just cycle through members as you appear on my screen. Councillor Stennett.
Recommendation to grant.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cordingley.
Support officer's recommendation to grant. Very much agreed with you and Councillor Bunting and Morgan.
Okay. Councillor Minnis.
I don't support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Support officer recommendations to grant, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Durrell.
I'm going to go against officer recommendation to grant. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Support the officer recommendation to grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you, Chair. Against officer recommendation to grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Last time I was for it, I'm for it again this time. I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Chairman. With apologies to Councillor Winstanley and others for mixing my brands up, I confirm I'm supporting officer recommendation to grant.
Thank you. Councillor Carey.
Support, please, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Support officer recommendation to grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Barclay.
I support officer recommendation to grant. Thank you.
Thank you. And I shall also be voting to support officer recommendation to grant, and that application is approved. The next item on the agenda is proposed stopping up order of highway at Brighton Grove in Ashton upon Mersey. Just before we move to a vote on that, we will receive an introduction from Ms. Hendren, please.
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. Yes, just a quick introduction. This refers to the application that was approved at the last meeting for the Sale Magistrates Court. It's the stopping up order for Ashton Lane and Brighton Grove. There's 4 sections that are subject to the order. There is a map supplied with the agenda, which hopefully you have all seen. And we are asking the committee if they would raise no objections and approve the order.
Thank you. I think Councillor Hartley's indicated he'd just like to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry to delay matters. It's within my ward, Ashton Mersey. So, so I guess the area that is significant is area 3 on the plan. So this is stopping up the sort of loop of Ashton Lane that goes around the gyrator that's there at the moment. So I can understand why that's necessary for the development to happen. And it may not be a matter for us, but I suppose in deciding whether we raise any objection, it would be useful to know what plans are in place for the traffic there, because at the moment, sort of all the roughly eastbound traffic on Ashton Lane goes around that loop of road, and the westbound traffic goes along the straight section of Ashton Lane, and you can see from the plan that there's sort of various traffic islands at the moment because of the gyratory, so it doesn't look like two-way traffic will be possible there. So I'm just wondering if you can give us any assistance as to what the plans are going to be for traffic to be diverted whilst that stopping up is in place.
Well, the stopping up will take away any highway rights across it, so it will become privately owned. It will revert back to whoever the landowner is, and it will be used to construct the development. So once the order is made, there'll be no highway rights over that section, and the scheme itself will form part of a section 278 and a section 38. The details, which I haven't got yet, I can certainly speak to Jeff in the morning to see if he's had anything. To my knowledge, we've not had the designs yet.
Yeah, well, it's perhaps something we can pick up outside of the meeting, because I suppose the question is where's that eastbound traffic going to go if it once the stopping up order is in place. So I think that's something that we certainly as a ward council I'd want some further information on, and residents would need to be sort of clearly advised about what those arrangements were.
Absolutely, yeah. As I say, when I get in the morning, I'll have a word with Jeff. This is one of the projects that he's been leading on, and as I say, to my knowledge, we haven't got the highway designs yet, but I will speak to him just to see what information he's got.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hendren. Committee's been asked that we raise no objection to this stopping up order. I'm happy to propose to that effect. Is anyone happy to second that?
Or second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Can't see anybody indicating that they'd like to speak. As such, I'll just move to a vote that we raise no objection to the proposed stopping up order. Move through members as you appear on my screen. Councillor Stemmett.
Recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cordingley.
Support the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Minnis.
I support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Support the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jerome.
Support the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. Support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you, Chair. Support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Support the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Support the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carey.
Support, please, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Support, please, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Barclay.
Support the recommendation.
Thank you. And I shall also be written to support the recommendation, and no objection is raised to that stopping recorder. Next agenda item is urgent business. I haven't been notified of any urgent business. I did, however, just want to take this opportunity to reflect on the fact that this is actually Councillor Stennett's last meeting of Planning Committee, as he is due to stand down from the council in May. Councillor Stennett is a long-standing councillor in Clifford Ward, I think from 1993, has provided continual service, and he is also a long-standing member of this committee. I just wanted to put on record my thanks for his service, for his thoughtful remarks when he has contributed at committee, and for his friendship, I suppose, throughout my much shorter time on council. So thank you, Councillor Stennett. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that you will very much be missed. So with that, I think we're now in a position to bring this